Okay, let's continue. So let's look at the problem 96 on the page 486. We need to find the inverse of this given function and state the domain. So it's on the page 486. Problem 96. We have the arranged function f of x equal to 2 minus sine of pi x minus pi, and x is between the 1/2 and 3/2. So let's first get the domain of the inverse function. To find the domain of the inverse, we first find the range of the original. We know the maximum of the sine is equal to 1. And when the sine takes the maximum, this f of x takes the minimum, right? So the minimum of f of x is equal to 2 minus 1, okay, when the sine takes the maximum 1. So this guy is equal to 1. So y is the minimum of this range function. And when the sine takes the minimum, then this f of x takes maximum. So the maximum of this f of x is equal to 2 minus -1. So that is 3. So we get the range of this f. So that is a closed interval from 1 to 3. Okay. Then the domain of the inverse. F inverse is equal to the range of this original, that is the closed interval from 1 to 3. Now let's try to find this expression for the inverse function. So we just replace f of x by y, right, equal to 2 minus sine of the pi x minus pi. And let's switch the x and y. This is one of the steps in the procedures for finding the inverse function. So switch. Then we get the x equal to 2 minus sine of the pi y minus pi. Now this is equation satisfied by the inverse function. Then we need to solve this equation for y. So let's move this sine to the left side and move this x to the right side. Then we get the sine of the pi y minus pi equal to 2 minus x. And we just see the domain of the inverse function is the closed interval from 1 to 3. So here this x belongs to this closed interval. Okay. And that is to say x is greater than or equal to 1 and less than or equal to 3. Then we need to find the range for this 2 minus x. We just multiply each part by -1. We get the -1 greater than or equal to -x, which is greater than or equal to -3. And then we add the 2 to the each part. Then we get 2 minus 1 greater than or equal to 2 minus x greater than or equal to 2 minus 3. So that is just to see 1 greater than or equal to 2 minus x greater than or equal to minus 1. So this value 2 minus x is indeed, okay, between the -1 and 1. When we write this in this way, 2 minus x belongs to the closed interval from -1 to 1, which is the domain of the inverse function, right? And also this y, that is the function value of the inverse function, right? So the range of the inverse is equal to the domain of the original. So right now for the domain, for the original, the domain is between the 1/2 and the 3/2. Then for the inverse, the range of this inverse is also equal to the domain of the original, which is the from the 1/2 to the 3/2. So we know the y here must be between the 1/2 and the 3/2, because the range of the inverse function is equal to the domain of this original function, right? Now from here, we just multiply each part by pi. Okay, let me move to the next page. So we have the half pi less than or equal to pi y and less than or equal to 3 pi over 2. And then we subtract the pi from each part. So we have the half pi minus pi, which is less than or equal to pi y minus pi, which is less than or equal to 3 pi over 2 minus pi. You simplify, you get negative half pi less than or equal to pi y minus pi, and which is less than the half pi. Now let's copy that equation which the inverse function satisfies. We have the sine of the pi y minus pi equal to 2 minus x. So by now, this expression is between the negative half pi and half pi, which is the domain of the inverse sign, right? And this 2 minus x is between the -1 and 1, which is the range of the sign, or say the domain of the inverse. Okay, I should say this negative half pi to half pi is the range of the inverse sign. Okay, so now from the definition of the sine function and the inverse sine function, we know right now we can take the inverse sine of both sides. This angle, which is between the negative half pi to half pi, pi y minus pi, is really equal to the arc sine of the 2 minus x. Okay, and this holds because this pi y minus pi is between the negative half pi and half pi, which is the range of the inverse sine. And also this 2 minus x is between the -1 and 1, which is the domain of this inverse sine. And then from here, you add the pi to the both sides, you have the pi y equal to pi plus arc sine of the 2 minus x. Then you divide both sides by pi, you have the y equal to 1 plus 1 over pi times arc sine of 2 minus x. Then finally, replace y by the f inverse. So you have the inverse of f equal to 1 plus 1 over pi times arc sine of the 2 minus x. And down. So by now we find the inverse